Hello, everybody, and welcome to Career Lunch Break. I am so excited for my guest today. Ann Barker is with us. Ann is a go to market executive in the procurement space, and I am so proud to call Ann a friend as well. She and I had the opportunity to spend many years working together at Amazon Business. And since then, Ann is doing additional new things in her life. And I just admire Ann so greatly. And I'm so excited to have her here because we're going to talk a lot about women's leadership, mentorship, supporting other women in the workplace, and all of the things that I think she and I have in common together as women leaders in the tech space. So, Ann, welcome to Career Lunch Break. Tell us a little bit about yourself, like the quick download version.
Thank you, Erin. I so appreciate you having me on your podcast. I am just delighted to be speaking with you today. Hi, everyone. I am so glad to be here. I am a 25-year B2B executive sales leader. I have spent my career really navigating the ups and downs of a sales process and cycle and working with some very wonderful organizations over the 25 years. And most recently at Amazon Business, where I led our strategic 150 team who focused on our top Fortune 500 customers as our primary focus. Um, just very happy to be here and tell you a little bit about my career and what I've navigated. In addition to, the professional side, I'm a mom of two girls. So raising them to be functioning and happy and supportive and professional individuals themselves is greatly important to me. I have one in college and one out of college, and I've been married for 20 years, and I have a dog named Kate.
Awesome. Yeah. So Anne's a little ahead of me with the being a successful mom and getting them out of the nest. Mine are still little, but I think that's a great segue, actually, Anne, to talk about the first thing. So, obviously today you're an executive, you're leading very large teams, working with very large customers. And, I think many people, our younger selves might look at our future selves or ourselves today and say, wow, that's really intimidating. But everyone gets their start somewhere. And I know your start, was you started in television advertising, if I'm not mistaken, right? So could you talk to me a little bit about how you got started in your career and what the beginning of your career looked like?
I would love to. I think oftentimes about that career progression and how I started working, in a very local environment in sales where I was working for first a radio station for about a year. And then I went into television because television is more expensive than radio. And my commission checks I knew would just be a little bit bigger. So I made that leap very early on. But I was working for a CBS affiliate in South Carolina that had great ratings. And I learned a lot about how you cultivate and prospect deals yourself. It was kind of a you eat what you kill situation. So I was a young mom and really money motivated. And so I was very active in prospecting and building my pipeline and talking to both local business owners as well as I was working with advertising agencies on big companies like Walmart and Toyota. And it taught me a lot. I spent 5 years at this television station and still have friends today. Actually, I'm going to see some next weekend that I met during that time, which was uh, quite the growth opportunity for me. I remember I closed my first really big new customer was a furniture store and this home store, Rug and Home. They're actually very well known. They have 4 locations now, but the owner was actually quite the mentor to me, and I still connect with him today. Indian man who had come to this country very early in his career with his wife and is now a multimillionaire and very successful. And he took a chance on me when I brought him ideas for an advertising campaign and negotiated with me just over and over again. And we ended up over a 5-year period just making, fast friends. And I've always, kind of looked up to him. And anyway, I got my start really because somebody referred me, and that's kind of what it takes, It's not necessarily what you know, but who you know, and I think that's still very applicable today, as my oldest daughter is trying to find her, first real big girl job out of college. And, somebody took a chance on me and I delivered, and that's just been the story of my career ever since.
I would agree with that. Having worked with you, I would say Anne is somebody who does not drop the ball. And you are definitely someone who I think when you're given like I don't say a task, but like a mission. If you're given that target to go after, one of the things I admire a lot about you is your tenacity and your ability to stay very focused on a goal or on the things that are important. And, in our prep, when we were getting ready, I always asked some questions. And, one of the things I asked about was you told me that you started in television advertising sales and then you had to make sort of that tension decision between motherhood and what your family needed and work. And it sounds like you were doing very well at work. You had found a mentor, you were succeeding, you were making commission, but you decided to make a shift or a pivot in your career. Walk the listeners through, because I think many women, especially if they've chosen children in their lives, you start to hit that point of tension of, I can't do it all, or the things that used to work don't work anymore. And so what was that situation like? You were 14 years in and you decided to make a shift. A lot of people would be scared to do that because they'd think, I've chosen my path. And if I change it, it's risk. So just walk me through that. Like, what was going on? What happened? What led to that decision? And ultimately, like, how did you navigate that?
Sure. It was a very pivotal time. My girls, one was leaving elementary school, going into middle school, and my youngest was just getting ready to start elementary school. And I recognized that after years of having after school help and nannies, which I was fortunate that I could afford that, but I was commuting 45 minutes back and forth to work, and my husband was doing the same thing. And it was just not working for my family the way that I wanted it to, and I knew that I wanted to be around in the afternoons. I wanted to take them to their activities. I wanted to be the one in the car pickup line. I wanted to take them to swim practice, and one was in gymnastics and one was in swim, and I just wanted to be there to make dinner every night, and it was just really important to me. I realized how fleeting, those years were, and so I made a conscious decision to look outside of television. Actually, after the best year I had ever had in 2011, I had made the most money I'd ever made. I was working with the biggest companies I'd ever worked with before, and I was in a good spot. But it's not all about money and work-life balance. There's a price for that. And I made a conscious decision to seek out a work from home position so that I could be there for them in the afternoons. And it led me to move completely out of the television industry and into commodities. And so I took a role with Office Depot's business division where I could leverage my B2B sales background, but I could also learn a new skill set, selling directly into procurement instead of selling directly to business owners or directly to ad agencies. Now I was going to be focused on selling directly into procurement. And it was a great experience. I had some really great sales leaders in that organization who taught me the ropes of selling into procurement, negotiating large contracts with rebates and early pay discounts and multiple locations that have to be serviced. And I learned about logistics and supply chain and product categories. And it gave me a really solid foundation so that, I could actually I really did shift from media and advertising into this procurement landscape, which was ultimately really good for me and for my family.
Yeah. Was there ever a point where, you know, I mean, we're sitting here and obviously it all worked out okay, right? Because like you've only grown a career that's even better from there. But was there a point when you had made that choice? Because I find myself sitting in conversations with a lot of women who are at that tension point where they're saying, what was working before doesn't feel like it's working for me anymore. And sometimes it starts from that place of a feeling, which can be scary, right? Because we never know if the feeling is a real feeling that we should pull on, or if it's a feeling where it's like, oh, I should stuff that down and ignore it because it's just, I should stay the course. So as you made this change, I'm so curious, was it an easy change? Did you have moments where you were like, oh my God, what the heck did I do? Like this was a mistake, or, you're in a new space, a new industry. You go from being sort of that expert to being somebody who doesn't know it all, which can also be hard sometimes. So, like, let's talk about that a little bit because I think listeners would like to hear about the real version of shifting. And is it a smooth road or did it come with certain ups and downs?
Well, it's interesting the element that you speak about learning something new, learning a new trade. Um, I think my naivete did not really want to acknowledge that I was going to have to actually learn something new. I just thought sales is sales. And I guess at the end of the day, it kind of is. But I went from selling air, literally air, hopes and dreams, to selling actual physical products. And it was a big shift. I had to learn a lot about how that works and merchandising and supply chain and um, pricing requirements, contract requirements, logistics. It was very different. And I was fortunate enough that I just never doubted that I could do it. And I just thought, like, this is the situation I'm in now, and I'm going to make it work. And I do have that type of grit that I don't shy away from difficult situations. I just kind of go through it. And sometimes that's challenging, right? Sometimes it's one day at a time, sometimes it's 1 hour at a time. And I really learned so much about what I was capable of in those, 6 or so years where I was in that role. And fortunately for me, I again developed very good relationships with leaders in the organization. And once they moved on to new things, um, such as Amazon, I was eventually recruited over by a leader who had really helped me in
Mm,
my time there. But one thing I'd like to just address is that, it's not always about somebody showing you the way, but more about somebody giving you the right amount of information so that you can figure out the way yourself. And
I love that.
that was the type of leadership that I had there. And um still uh, very close with that leader today. We've always remained in touch, and that leadership style I ended up taking on when I made the shift from an individual contributor to a leader myself.
Yeah. I I don't wanna put you on the spot with this, but I think that's such a wonderful piece of learning or insight or advice is that idea of not necessarily somebody giving you the explicit instructions, but, like, giving you the space and sort of the framework to trust yourself and to build that trust in yourself because I even looking at my own career, I can see that where building self-trust is a really important component of long-term success because you're not always gonna have the blueprint. You're not always gonna know what to do. You sorta have to know when to like you said, some days you gotta take it minute by minute, some days it's day by day. So, you talked about having, a network and, several times you've referenced a network already and, like, knowing people, and I agree with you. Having a strong network is really important. Talk to me about how you build your network because we live in this age of LinkedIn where I think networking has sort of an icky connotation. If I go out and I get enough connections on LinkedIn, I'm networked. But this is more about interactions with people and things like that. So when you made this move and you left Office Depot and you moved to your next role, and you said, "I had a person who I knew who had moved on to" like, let's talk a little bit about that. Like, how did you build those relationships? How do you stay in touch with people effectively? That type of thing.
Well, I think that I've always navigated my professional career with a high level of authenticity. I try to really be my genuine self with my customers and with my leaders. Sometimes, it doesn't always work. I tend to not always have the best filter. I can sometimes be very direct and tell it like it is, but again, I think it's worked for me. And I have maintained professional relationships with colleagues and mentors because the relationship I built was authentic. I wasn't just showing up to work and, putting on, a facade. I was genuinely interested in, you spend so much time with your peers at work. I genuinely wanted to understand how they were navigating certain challenging situations at work and what could I learn from that and how could I contribute to making the organization a little bit better for myself and for my peers. And through that, I think I've always been able to establish solid relationships and I've carried them forward. And I think at each place I've worked, which I've never worked anywhere less than 5 years, I've always managed to bring with me, learnings from the prior experience and leverage those in the next and continue to grow and build those relationships. I've always kept in touch, whether it's a text or a LinkedIn message or sending someone a card at Christmas. I mean, I still do that today. And it's interesting because it sort of shifted in my career in the last, I would say, 10 years from really working on my professional network from company to company, but it pivoted to now my customer network is really where I find so much value because I have had the same customers from one company to the next. And it has really helped me. And I feel like, people move around and it's good. It's good to stay in touch and stay connected.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's wonderful advice regardless of whether you're just starting in your career or you're, 20 years into something. It's that idea that everybody moves and sort of that force multiplier that happens, that the close-knit group that existed at company A each moves to their next place, and suddenly you are networked at 10 new places and 2 new industries and that type of thing. And again, I keep saying admire, but I really do. There's a lot that I admire about you, which is why I asked you to come on here. But Anne is one of those people who her customers love her, and she has real relationships with her customers. And when I think about my own mentor, who is also in sales, I see a similar thread there in that when you're really good in sales, you're really invested in those relationships with the people who you work with. And those people are your customers, yes, but you get to know them as people and they get to know you as a person, as a mom, as someone who has interests. And finding that place of sharing equal parts of professionalism and personal life with your customers and really building those deep relationships. I see that as a really success or a very common thread in women who are successful in sales, like sharing all of the aspects of your life. Um, you know, you are a woman in sales and you're a woman who leads, and you have 2 girls. And oftentimes, you hear stories of it's tough to be a woman in certain environments, or it's hard to balance those things. And a lot of the women who I talk to talk about some of like the challenges they encounter with balancing those things. And you've alluded to this a little bit already, but how do you balance it? How do you, I mean, you're not saying yes to everything all the time. So how do you balance all of this?
So it's a great question. And I think what I've really learned over the last 5 or 6 years, especially with my time in tech at Amazon, is that women, they don't just need mentorship, they need sponsorship. And that comes in different forms. That comes in the form of helping women when they're not in the room, you're helping them, you're speaking of them. You know someone who can connect them to someone else, or you might hear of a role and you think about someone who would be a good fit for that role, and you advocate for them in a room where they're not present. And it's more than just like mentorship. And I think I have had the privilege of mentoring many women over the last really 5 or 6 years, but it has shifted to now where instead of saying yes to every mentorship opportunity, instead I'm advocating for these women that I know when the time is right and circumstances allow that. And I think that that type of advocacy is really what changes cultures in corporate America and especially in tech. And when you can advocate and you can get more women in the room and you can change a corporate culture, then you have different outcomes. And I think we really did see that over time in our own organization at Amazon Business, which is
Yeah, let's
amazing.
let's let's talk about that because I don't want to glaze over. Anne founded the Women's Advocacy Circle at Amazon Business, which became it was like like a startup basically within our organization from a cultural standpoint. It grew to over 400 members consisting of both women and allies within the organization. You guys put out annual events, monthly content, and drove a lot of really important conversations within our business about women growing their careers in tech, and also women supporting one another and being good people to one another and helping each other. You talked about the idea of mentorship and sponsorship. And I think I want to go back to that real quickly because if someone's not familiar with the difference, and you touched on a little bit, but I really want to drive that home of like, if someone is in a place where they want to move into leadership, and let's say they come and they join an organization like WAC, Women's Advocacy Circle, and they're like, I don't know, do I need a mentor? Do I need a sponsor? Like, how do I grow my career? Like, what advice would you give to someone about how to make the right decision of who they need in their corner?
It's a great question. I think you need to be very aware of your circumstances and your professional environment, and you need to seek out women who either have a role that you would aspire to attain one day, or you see them as a ally in a role that you already have, and you are, building a support structure for yourself. I think that you have to sort of ask yourself, what am I looking to accomplish? Is this going to be a long-term stay for me here in this organization? If so, how do I build my own network internally so that when I'm not in a room, somebody else maybe is going to speak, highly of me or reference my level of experience because I'm qualified for, whatever opportunity that might be discussed. So I would say that you have to really be intentional about who you choose to align yourself with, and it's interesting because, developing the women's advocacy circle, which I did, with several other women as founders, and it was quite a labor of love. But the reason we even did it in the first place was because there were really no women in leadership at the very top of our organization. And over the last 6 years, that completely changed to where now from the VP down is many women, including yourself.
Mhm.
And I just want to talk about that for a second because we led teams together that were partners, customer facing partners, where your team had a function and my team had a function. And our teams had to work very closely together in lockstep to provide a united front to the customer and to service the customer at a certain level that was sort of a white glove experience and a very tactical experience as well for them as they're navigating change management, which is often undefined and difficult to navigate and can make all the difference in the world at the end of the day. And I would like to say that, your listeners should know how you lead and how you lead with expertise, but also with empathy, and how when there might have been situations where our teams weren't aligned on direction, or maybe there was a conflict with a customer, or maybe there was internal misalignment with resources, which can happen anywhere. You and I, as leaders and as peers, would come together and discuss it openly and navigate, a plan forward together in partnership. And to me, like that's really what sponsorship and advocacy look like in an environment that can be high stress. When two women can demonstrate and lead by example, I think
Yeah.
that sends a message to everyone else.
Yeah. And I think it's important to share that we didn't always agree at first pass. Anne and I were not always just, roses and sunshine on the same page. She had her charter for her team and I had my charter for my team, and we had shared customer goals, but oftentimes, the how or the details, it took some figuring out. And it's a special thing to be able to work with another woman who you can both bring your strong opinions to the table. You can make space to hear one another. We can disagree respectfully. I know we've had to apologize to each other a couple times where we've been like, "Yeah, sorry, that kind of got a little heated," or whatever. But like repairing, coming back to that, having high levels of integrity, and at the end of the day, looking and saying, like, Anne, you're my friend at work, and I am so appreciative that you are here. And I know that I'm better and more supported because you were there next to me. And, finding those people when you're in a leadership role, finding those people who you can kind of spar with, but you, at the end of the day, like you've got each other. I
Mhm.
think that is the gold standard of what you're shooting for, because I knew that if Anne ever came to me, I would 100% have her back and support her with what she needed. And I always felt the same about her. And having that as a female leader in a very large tech organization is extremely reassuring and empowering. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Anne, but, I just, from my perspective, I think that that's something I valued most about our relationship and our working together.
Well, I thank you for that, Erin. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, for me, it just creates so much respect. I mean, I just had so much respect for you and your work and how you operate. And I think that respect was earned, right? We earned it together, and you
Mhm.
have it for me and I have it for you. And it's a beautiful thing, and it's rare in these tech cultures where um, it can seem like at times everyone's just out for themselves and it's all about me, 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 me. And, you have to collaborate with other people and you have to be able to be mature enough professionally to disagree and commit and to find a path forward. And you're exactly right. We had times where that happened, but I think at the end of the day our teams were better for it and good for us to, find solutions.
Yeah, I agree. All right, I'm going to pivot us a little bit again here. I don't have a graceful segue for this one, but I want to talk about it. I look back on my career and I can identify some moments that I ran into as I grew in leadership where they sucked. It was uncomfortable. Someone was very disrespectful to me. Something not fair happened. In my case, I went on a maternity leave and I had commission taken from me because I wasn't there when they paid the commission because I was having a baby. And I had really challenging interactions with a male leader who I reported to who, made my life very difficult. And I imagine that going through your own career, like you've come up against these friction points. And we don't have to dig into what happened, but I really want to talk more about the fact that like these things do happen. And yes, they happen to women. I think most humans run into this, but like when you come up against a difficult person in a work environment. Like how do you approach that? Like how do you keep it all level in your head and handle it and make your way through and make the right decision and just, it's so frustrating. And how do you make a good decision in the face of somebody who's just not that lovely to you?
Mhm. That's a really good question. I've definitely experienced that both from male and female leaders at different times in my career. And I think in sales, I deal with I've dealt with difficult customer situations many, many times where, you're trying to figure out a way forward with a customer who might be mad about an outcome or something failed, and you have to figure out how to make that right. And I think that's really good. That's a really good education on how you do that in a professional setting as well when you're used to doing that, solving customer problems. But I think navigating those personalities, it comes down to an individual basis, I think. And it's important that you sort of understand what makes people tick and how they think. And I think if you can try to relate and have empathy, even if it's hard, then you're a little bit closer to figuring out how you can coexist with that person and make it, an amenable welcomed relationship. It might not always be the most fun, but you can coexist in a positive way. And I think if that's the outcome at the end of the day, then that's a win. So I think you really have to understand like what motivates someone and how do they think about certain things. And that's definitely been a challenge that I've experienced at different places. And I might think differently than someone else. And in sales, especially, it can come down to people can bicker over commissions and maybe somebody doesn't want to help someone else because there's money in the middle and they might think that they're going to, you know, take from someone else or someone's going to take from them and therefore they're not going to help them in a way when they actually maybe should. And I think you have to navigate each one of those situations in a very delicate way to just coexist ultimately in a positive way together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I agree with you, and I think that knowing yourself, and again, it's like as you're going through that journey of your own personal growth, when you're starting your career and you're kind of figuring out, you're finding those mentors and sponsors, like you're picking up those little bits and pieces along the way that help you figure out how to navigate different personalities. And I mean, I know myself, I've had times where it's like I wasn't sure what to do, and I did have to look to a person who I considered a mentor or a person who had sound advice. I admired the person she was. She was a little forward in her career and her, you know, she was about 10 years ahead of me motherhood wise. And so I could see a lot of what I admired in her. And so a lot of times I would say, okay, I need to go talk to her about how to handle this because I don't actually have a framework myself built yet, but I know people who I admire. I have sort of these archetypes out there of individuals who can help me maybe figure out how to navigate something like that gracefully if I don't necessarily have the tools already in my backpack.
Mhm. That's a really good point. Having those champions that you go to for different reasons is also really a great aspect of why it's important to build a network so that, you might go to a different mentor or advocate at a different time for a different situation. And
Mm.
I think that is really a good takeaway.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so thinking a little bit more about this like mentorship, great advice thread, I have a lot of women who are part of my network who are thinking about leadership. They've become a high performer within their space and they're starting to say, I would love to get into that next step where I have more influence over strategy and vision and sort of the bigger picture. So I wonder if you might have a piece of advice or two for a woman who is in a place in her career where she's ready to go to that next step and she's trying to figure out how do I do that or what's the right way to do that?
So there definitely came a point in my career where I was facing those same, internal decisions, and I was trying to decide, am I going to stay here or in this role, or am I going to take the leap? And I've developed this talent. I know how to do this job. Am I going to take what I have learned and now help build a team and help others? Which is ultimately what I did. But I think it comes down to you have to ask yourself, like, really, can I go beyond myself? When you're in an individual contributor role, you're thinking about yourself most of the time and your customers and what you're doing on a day in and day out basis and how that's going to impact and deliver results, ultimately to help you meet your goals. And when you're in a leadership role, it's a completely different thing. It's not just about doing a job well. It's about creating influence above you. And how do you create that influence above you to help support your team in a different way, which nobody really teaches you how to do that. You have to kind of figure that out along the way, but it's an extremely important part of being a leader. You have to also be willing to, you know, hire and develop and put time and effort and energy into someone who may not understand your industry or they may not understand how to navigate a certain type of customer in a specific industry. And you have to be willing to teach and coach. And I always like to think about myself as a little bit of a player coach because I'm at my best in front of customers. I love to be with my team, with customers. It's been my favorite part of being a leader. um, and so I think you have to ask yourself, like, can I actually take on additional responsibilities outside of just navigating a complex sales cycle? Can I influence above me? Can I help drive a strategy or decision making across an executive leadership team because you see yourself a vision and a direction? And how do you communicate that forward? So I think it's a lot more than just being good at a particular, product sell or sales motion. You have to know how to go beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely a shift and there's sort of this implied trajectory for anybody in a professional role where you work as an individual contributor for a while and then you're really good at that and then if you're really good at it then you get promoted to leading other people doing that. And you made the point just a second ago about how they're two very completely different skills. And it isn't necessarily that if you're great at selling and being in front of the customer and, managing your book of business and that's just what lights you up every day, sometimes there can be a pressure to move to that next level of leadership because, you have to move onward and upward and grow, but it's a completely different job. And, you were talking about, can I do this and can I do that and sort of doing that evaluation. And one of the questions that I often ask women is, do I really want to?
Mhm.
Right? There can be this push or this current that pulls you toward, well, you're gonna have to become a leader if you wanna be something. And, I think that for many of us, that does at a certain point, if it scratches that itch of a way to give back and to start to mentor and to engage with a broader population of people. But also, there's another side of that coin that for some women, like finding those conversations where you decide, I actually don't want to do that. And I feel like I have to do that. And finding that confidence to say no to something that feels like everything is pushing or pulling you toward it. I'm wondering if you've ever had anything like that in your career. Maybe not necessarily leadership, but just where you felt like the general momentum around you was pushing you towards something, but your inner voice was telling you something different. And what was that?
So for me personally, I was fortunate enough to have, a wonderful, I call her a unicorn, female leader. You had her as well, and was a force, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
she had great vision and great strategy, and she fortunately saw the potential in me and encouraged me to take this leap and put me in a position where I could be successful and gave me the opportunity to build a team and to lead by example. And it's changed the trajectory of my career, and I'm so grateful for her. However, I also just yesterday had a female sales rep that I currently lead today tell me that she never wants to go into leadership, and that actually some of the experiences that I've had recently that have not been optimal, she has she's learned from that, and she has said it's reconfirmed to me that I don't ever wanna go into leadership because it's not always, easy. And I respect that, and she's probably one of the best salespeople I've ever encountered in my career. The way she navigates a customer, the way she's constantly positive, the way she never stops. She's relentless. She is very comfortable being uncomfortable. She asks questions until there's nothing left to ask. I mean, and she until she figures out a solution. But leadership is not where she wants to go because she is very happy in her craft, and that's enough for her. And I think that's a very mature viewpoint, and if you can come to that and you're happy with it, like, you don't have to listen to the outside noise and feel the pressure to go into a leadership role. I, quite frankly, was so encouraged by this female leader who asked me to build a team that, it gave me so much confidence, and I thought, "Here's a new challenge, and I wanna do this, and I'm gonna figure this out." And luckily, I had wonderful support system around me, and took the leap, but not everybody needs to feel like they have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yes, I agree with you on the leader that we had and the encouragement and support and just sort of the path that she paved out to make it easier for the
Mhm,
rest of us.
mhm,
But I love that she let you have that space to kind of try it on and see, right? And rather than you not go after it because it maybe wouldn't have been the right thing or just to leap into it and hope and pray, like she just made such a safe space to gracefully step into something, and I think she knew your strengths really well and 100% set you up to really thrive, found ways that the things that you were already good at, you were able to continue to lean on those as you kind of grew these new skills or kind of this new exposure in the new role, and I love that idea also as listeners are kind of hearing this conversation and we're talking about mentors and sponsors and people who advocate for us. When you're thinking about making a move into something new, if you have that kind of opportunity to have someone who's there who's kind of saying like, I'm going to give you space, but I got you. And I see this in you and I'm encouraging you. I think it's such a wonderful opportunity to lean into and try because we talk about the two-way door thing at Amazon, right? It's a decision that you can go through, but you can back out, you can come back. You're not stuck. And so I love the idea that you had an opportunity to go after something that spoke to you and try it in a really supportive way. And for you, it's 100% where you belong.
mhm,
But for others, if they want to try those things on and then they say, hey, it's not for me, like I love that idea of just finding a leader, a mentor, a person who supports and sees the best in you and helps you kind of try things on and see if they work and also change your mind. And let changing your mind or deciding the norm or the typical route isn't for you. And that's great too.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's so interesting because at the time where I pivoted into this leadership role, number one, it was with very huge, global, complex, multinational
Hmm.
companies who were all inside the Fortune 500. There's a lot of pressure in that alone. And ultimately, I ended up with a team of all men who reported to me, and it was just incredible because and one was my same age, but all the rest were older than me too, which is a totally different dynamic. And what was so wonderful about it is that there was a mutual respect between my team and myself. I had so much respect for them. They had so much respect for me, and it was just a really awesome experience. And I mean, I still text them today, even though I'm not in the role anymore. And one of them called me yesterday. So it's
Yeah.
just it just says a lot about you can take a leap and it can work out. And it's you sometimes you just gotta trust yourself and just give it a shot.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
think that's a good takeaway here is trusting yourself, listening to yourself, believing in yourself, and finding the people around you who, when maybe you don't have that 100% certainty feeling, they're people who say, I see this in you. I'm going to be here to support you. I've got your back. That's really, I think, looking at my own career, how I've been able to make some of those different jumps is you've got good people around you, a network, if you will, who are like, no, I see these great things in you, and like take a little bit more of a leap and go after it. Um, we're coming a little bit to the end of the time here. I appreciate so much that you've carved out your lunch hour to talk to me today. One, I have two questions. One, I want to make sure we didn't miss the opportunity to talk about anything that felt really important to you. And then I just have one final question that I ask all my guests. But let me make space first. Is there anything else, Anne, that we're here and we're talking today? Is there anything else that you'd want to share with listeners or make sure we talk about?
I think I just want to highlight the fact that, we talked a lot about mentorship, sponsorship, advocacy, and we're not doing it just because it feels good, right? We're doing it because we ourselves have seen what positive outcomes can result from advocating for one another, sponsoring one another, and being partners. And I think that's what really truly creates the best business outcomes. And so I just want to double click on we're not just talking the talk, we're walking the walk. And for me, that's been really important.
Yeah. That's a pretty mic drop moment right there. I like that. It was well said.
Thank
All
you.
right. So, final question. I ask every guest this, but tell me about a piece of advice that you've received somewhere along the way in your life. Could be in your career, could be in your personal life, but something that's like that one of those little golden nuggets that you carry with you that our listeners should walk away with today.
Great question, and you did not prep me for this, but I
No,
have I
I
have
didn't.
I have the advice. It actually was shared with me about a year ago when I was, sort of, hearing this little inner voice in myself that was saying, maybe after 7.5 years at Amazon, I need to look outside of the company and try something new. And I was really wrestling with that because I had an amazing journey at Amazon, which I'm so grateful for. And I went to a mentor of mine and we had, conversation, and he said to me, "And can you kind of do your job with your eyes closed? Are you kind of on autopilot or is it still challenging you?" And I said, "I can kind of do it with my eyes closed." And he said, "Then you need to move on. You need to go somewhere else where your talent and your skill set is going to be valued and appreciated in a new way. And you've accomplished so much already in this role. You should take that somewhere else." And for me, it was a defining moment because it was like it seemed so clear to him, when I
Hmm.
was explaining to him kind of I was wrestling with this decision. And then when he put it to me like that, like, are you even really, are you even challenged anymore? Is this just second nature? And he was right. It's like, okay, well, I was at a point where, yeah, I could just coast. I could continue to do this. Not that it wasn't challenging or that my goals weren't big or anything like that. It was just that I knew the I knew that I needed to leverage the skills that I had developed in a new way with a new group of people that, where I could add value in a different way and leverage what I had learned and contribute in new ways. And so that was really important. to me and definitely a defining moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that shifting complexity for sure. It's not that the place where you're at doesn't still offer great things and great people and all of that, but taking yourself and putting yourself in a new set of dynamics and challenges and environment and things like that, it helps you continue to grow and develop. And that maybe that's one thing to just underscore at the end is that, you're never done, right? You don't ever hit a point in your career. I think young Erin used to think, oh, I'm going to get to this point where you have it all figured out and then it's just great. And it doesn't, right? It's always changing. You're juggling children and the seasons of your children if you're a mother and you're dealing with your career and your aspirations change and your interests change and um what excites you every day changes. And it sounds to me like that mentor told you to say yes to keeping yourself engaged and interested and challenged and that you hadn't just arrived at this place where you should hang out for the rest of your life.
Right. Right. I wanted I need to grow, right? Like life is an evolution and we need
Yeah.
to grow and challenge ourselves in new ways. And I really took that from that conversation and, now I am experiencing a whole new set of challenges and it's interesting. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I would say to anyone, if you're just debating this right now, ask yourself, are you in a position where you are on autopilot and are you ready for the next thing? Or, do you still have more to learn in your current scope? And is there still more to give?
Yeah. Well, we're gonna leave it at that because I think that's the perfect point to hit stop and to say, "Anne, it has been such a pleasure. I miss working together every day. I just think you're just someone I respect so much. I think you carry yourself with such a great presence. You're good to the people around you. Um, and when people bring up your name and you're not in a room, I always hear wonderful things about you. And, I think that's the mark of a really admirable person and somebody who, as a leader, people should want to work for, and organizations should want to have as part of their leadership team. So thank you for spending the better portion of an hour here with me today. I really appreciate your insights. And thanks again.
Well, Erin, I think the world of you, and this was the highlight of my week, probably of my whole month, and I'm here for you anytime. So, I also have a referral for you for someone you should speak to for another podcast. So I'm going to
All
send you that
right.
information. Yeah,
Yes. All right. See, this is the network at work right here.
there you go. There you go.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Erin.